When I say the words abstract strategy game, what sort of games do you think of? Obviously there's the classics, chess and Go certainly fit on the list, but what about modern abstracts? If an abstract game is defined as one where the theme isn't necessary to the gameplay, what games are definitely not abstract? Keeping this definition in mind, we're looking at Quin, a newly kickstarted board game from designer Brian Rooney, which we're previewing today. This provided preview copy showcases some really neat new component ideas, but do they blind the player to gameplay issues, or will this become the game you can see bringing to your table again and again? Let's open the box and find out. Inside our game box, we open the lid to find the 2 Quin keys, which will be your primary instructional and points of reference. Past those is the game's quad fold board with a playing surface that's shaped like an eye. There are 99 magnetic points on it, and those are going to be important, but in a second. Inside the box's main channel, we find 2 satin bags filled with the game's 3D replaceable face magnetic pieces. There are 2 0G boards to hold the non-playing pieces and a strategy guide giving you alternate play modes as well as more detailed rule explanations. Let me set this one up quick and I'll show you how it plays. Each player in Quin starts the game with 17 of these magnetic towers. The faces are removable, and that matters because the first thing you're going to do is decide if you want to clone one of your pieces. You can choose any of your pieces that aren't a light or a shadow and remove its face, swapping it out for one of these more colorful faces. Once that's done, replace the piece back on the 0G board. From here, you're going to choose 10 of those to put in your starting points, the 5 outermost of which are called your gateways. Once you've decided on your starting pieces, which cannot be artificial light, you're ready to begin. The rule for choosing a first player is that both players get a small glass of water, and starting at the same time, whoever finishes their glass first gets to decide who goes first. Refreshing. So, the object of Quin is to get your singular light piece to the center or first sight space of the eye-shaped board. You can also win by capturing your opponent's light piece, thus making sure they cannot accomplish this objective. To do this, you're going to alternate turns back and forth with your opponent, which Quin calls your rival. Each piece has a different movement range on the board denoted on the key. The very powerful shadows, which you only have 2 of, can move up to 7 spaces each turn, while the voids, of which you have 4, possibly 5 if you cloned it, can only move 1 space at a time. Your opponent can't see which pieces are which because the faces should always point towards you. The setup here is a little bit different because I wanted to show you these faces with a top-down camera while still showing you these little friends here. Normally, both players would have their pieces either fully showing or on their towers. If you played Stratego back in the day, you already have a certain understanding of how this is going to play out. You can deduce based on movement which pieces are which, but keep in mind that you don't have to move each piece the full available spaces. You could masquerade this shadow by only moving it 2 spaces at a time around the board until it's time to strike, pushing it to the full 7 in order to capture. When one player moves a piece onto another piece's space, this has the unfortunate name of flashing. When you flash another player's piece, both are revealed, and then you will check the key to see if the attacking piece can capture the defender. If it can, then the captured piece is moved onto the attacker's 0G board. If it can't capture, then the attacking piece will take over the space where the defender was, and the defending piece will move to where the attacker started its move. Keep this in mind as you play. It's incredibly important. Sometimes you want to disrupt your opponent's positioning, but you won't have a powerful piece in place. This reflector, for example, can't capture anything. It only reveals when it flashes, but with the swapping of positions, it can still mess up your rival enough to buy you some time. Captured pieces aren't lost, however. Each player begins the game with a totem, which the rules say you have to bring with you. They do say it can be anything: a rock, a pewter wizard figure with an ancient magic staff adorned with a single crystal, even a giant teddy bear. I'm not certain how much I love having to bring my own piece to a game, but it does make it a little more personal. I'm on the fence about it. You can sacrifice your totem once per game in order to bring a captured piece back onto the board. However, you don't bring it back on your side. You bring it back onto one of your rival's gateways. This becomes massively important in the mid-game as you try to keep your rival away from the center and from your own pieces. Once that piece has infiltrated your half of the board, it can start to wreak serious havoc with your defense. The moral of the story is, be careful about how happy you are capturing your rival's shadow. You may have played directly into their hand. You'll go back and forth like this, swapping pieces, reflecting them around the table, using gravity to amass a huge force with your voids around a key point until you manage to sling your light into the middle, or capture your opponent's precious photon generator. My issues with Quin are small, but vital. The sight lines you're allowed to move along actually converge and disperse at the iris, the center location here. These two spaces on either side of first sight can be moved on by any piece, but only light can move onto first sight itself. That means that a piece with decent movement had some choices to make once they traverse the center. A shadow, for example, can move 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces onto the far side of the iris, and then from there they can follow any of these 3 sight lines out. That's not completely clear by just looking at the board, and if you explain it during pregame teaching, it's not guaranteed that it will be remembered when it comes time. Additionally, the horizon line here is verboten for most pieces. Only the peripheral piece can voluntarily move onto it. The others have to be slung or reflected on there if they want to move there. There's no visual or defining clue to help you remember that in your early games. Yes, once you've played a couple games, you'll remember that you can't do that, but it sucks for a new player to set up an elaborate plan only to be reminded that they can't do what they're trying to do. And that's only if the other player catches it. Keep in mind, I can't tell what your pieces are, so if you move onto the horizon normally, I'm going to assume that that piece is a peripheral, but maybe you just made a mistake and I won't know until it's possibly too late to remedy. Now we come to the main problem with this game, but it's important to note that it's not specific to Quin. Any reasonably abstract game is going to suffer from what I'll call the uneven player knowledge problem. Imagine you know how to play chess pretty well. You're not Bobby Fischer, because where is he, seriously? But you're what most people would call a good player. You like the game so much that you want to teach someone who's never played before. You're probably going to beat that player. Probably a lot. Probably pretty handily. Such is the problem with Quin. It's incredibly satisfying and tense for players of equal footing, but when you're teaching a new player, you'll need to handicap yourself. Fortunately, you can do that in the situation which I've done here. Experienced players can play face up in what Quin calls the vision mode, while the new player can play traditionally, hiding their pieces from you. This will help some, but ultimately it's going to take patience and restraint. With that out of the way, I want to say that apart from those ultimately more minor issues, Quin is a game that I have grown to absolutely love. When I started, my first couple games felt onerous. Learning which pieces could capture others, who can move where, and how to manipulate everything felt too hard, too confusing. After my third game, things finally clicked. I suddenly saw behind the code and was playing with strategies including feints and bluffing, tactical retreats, and more. And what's really exciting about Quin is that you can do all that. Chess players know that forcing your opponent into making mistakes is the key to winning. Quin provides the same feeling, but with even more going on. You can easily set up an early game win by marching your reflector carefully down the center, slinging your light into a checkmate position, and then watching the horror and panic on your rival's face as they try to determine if they can even catch you. Equally exciting is slowly pushing a shadow into position to prevent such a play, and then flying across the iris to capture their light and earn a quick victory. The paths to glory in Quin are many and varied, but all of them can be countered if you're paying attention. There are games that turn into epic attrition battles as well. Because you don't have to put your light on the board at the game's beginning, it can turn into a huge game of cat and mouse where there is no mouse. Bringing in pieces later to the game is going to be central to any winning strategy, and I'll note here that this is another shortfall of the game's rules. The key, which claims to be all you need to learn how to play Quin, mentions that you don't have to start with your light on the board, but the only mention of how to get things onto the board later in the game is a blink and you'll miss it sentence buried at the end of a paragraph about the iris. The strategy guide is similarly nearly silent on this very basic rule of the game. While stuff like this can get cleaned up in time for backers to not have any issues, it's curious how something like that can get missed, and what else I'm missing. At sundown, however, I'm willing to forgive a little frustration because the core experience is solid. Here, Quin is a game that I absolutely love playing. The strategic and tactical moments feel amazing, and the magnetic pieces allow for an elegant presentation. Additionally, in a nod to foresight, the removable phases ensure that any piece damage isn't game-breaking in the future. Tournament play is almost guaranteed, though best 2 out of 3 seems almost mandatory given the game's hidden information. I'm very happy with what I've got in this box, and I'm equally excited to see the final product. Quin is an outstanding tabletop experience that, by the time it gets to you, is very likely to be better than the game I have here. There are issues though, and it's not for the player who gets frustrated with multiple things to keep track of. Let's go through our checklist before I give you my final thoughts. In the box, rulebook clear and non-gender pronouns. Since Quin eschews the typical rulebook in favor of the double-sided key and an accompanying strategy guide, it can be disconcerting for players used to sitting down with a book and learning the game. The key isn't organized spectacularly well, and the strategy guide can sometimes lack clear examples of what it's trying to teach you. The designers have really aimed to get you to watch their how to play videos to learn, and while they're currently just fine, I'm hoping they get just a little bit better before release. Both the strategy guide and key avoid using gendered language at all though, opting for second-person pronouns you and yours throughout. Iconography clear. Each of the game's pieces has a unique but not entirely intuitive symbol. After a few plays, however, you'll have them down without needing to refer to the key. Similarly, learning which pieces are able to capture which other pieces is something that will challenge at first, but come more naturally as you get a few games under your belt. Stick with it. Packaging well done. My preview box is just a channel in the middle with all the pieces in a pair of satin bags. I'm hoping for something a little nicer in the retail version. On the table, good representation. Most abstract games avoid any issues here, and that's the case with Quin. There aren't any characters here to break down, so we'll move swiftly into component quality. Mixed and unknown. While the 3D printed towers are outstanding with their magnetic bases and swappable faces, the zero-G boards I have pretty badly warped with only a few plays. Admittedly, most of those were outside. And those are crucial to the game's function. Additionally, the unknown comes in not only how this game will look when it's finished, but I have some concerns about the board itself. Mine has 99 magnetic hotspots, but a note in my box said that the goal is to have the entire board magnetically reactive when it hits shelves. If done correctly, this could be really great, but I'm hesitant because the way the towers are built, if they fail to properly magnetize through the magnets and the towers falling out or some other unforeseen disaster, the game will become very difficult to correctly play. Time will tell here, but after 8 testing plays, everything seems to be holding up fine. If everything gets sorted out, the wow factor of Quin's components could be huge. Replay value, very high. Abstract games tend to fare well in this category, and Quin's no exception. With players of equal skill trying new strategies, this game could stay fresh for a long time. Fun to lose. Here's where my main criticism with Quin comes back. I don't think this game is fun at all to lose to a player of much higher skill than you are. With so much unknown, for a new player, the game could be over before you ever really know what's going on. While the brevity of Quin could be helpful in this category, it certainly won't endear anyone to want to set it up for another go. Having said that, playing with someone on your level is a fun, tight experience that is fraught with tension and interesting decisions. If you're unclear exactly where I stand on Quin, let me see if I can give you some insight. My last vision pun, I promise. It's so much fun to play when it's not over immediately, and it looks amazing on a table. During 2 of my games in my driveway, I had neighbors literally come out of their houses to see what we were playing. Now that might have something more to do with their kids wanting to play with my kid, who was also outside, but the point remains. Quin is both physically and appealingly magnetic, a gorgeous looking game that I will happily bring out again and again. You'll just have to be patient and careful with new players so they get into it as well. If you're convinced at this point, we've put the link to their Kickstarter in the description below for your ease of use. I'm Nicholas, reminding you to help protect the game population, always sleeve your cards. Hey everyone, if you liked our video, please hit that sub button and ring that bell for notifications. Check out all of our other offerings at goodluckhighfive.com, and please consider becoming a patron of the channel over at patreon.com/GLHFmagic. It helps us keep making reviews, videos, podcasts, and you can become a member for any dollar amount. We're also always looking for new games to review. You can reach us at glhfmagic@gmail.com. You can follow me, Captain N, the Game Master, at CaptainNGM on Twitter and Instagram, and follow the channel at GLHFmagic. Remember, please shop at your local game store whenever possible. Until next time, I'm Nicholas, and good luck. High five.